All right, we are live here at Stay Hot Industries talking about the NBA like we did last Wednesday. We talked about some trade deadline stuff, and we've seen one trade since then, the Cam Reddish one. If I'm not I don't think I've missed any others.
There was a smaller one that involved the Nuggets, but it doesn't quite involve any players. Bryn Forbes is a good player, and I guess Bol going to the Celtics is cool, but it's kind of a more of a
Bryn
minor.
Forbes.
Yeah.
I will never forget Bryn Forbes because I was watching a Suns versus Spurs game, I think in 2019, and Bryn Forbes was on the Spurs at this point. I think it was him. And he hit like 8 threes in a game on the Suns. It was stupid. So as far as I can tell, Bryn Forbes is a really does move the needle more than you're giving him credit for.
No, I'm a big Bryn Forbes fan, and I'm kind of disappointed that the Lakers didn't go and take a shot on him. I thought he was a guy who could get some solid rotational minutes for them and it wouldn't cost that much. Still leave him room to make another move, but what do I know? Bol to the Celtics will be interesting. Because if he doesn't get minutes, I wonder if he's still going to get he needs a chance.
Bol has a funny
Narratives.
name, and he's really freakishly tall. And if those things weren't the case, like no one would really care all that much. Like it's the same thing with Taco Fall and every other huge player that exists. Everyone just loves it because it's just like you don't see it often and it's rare. But like a lot of the times, that doesn't exactly like you need to be more than just tall. All right, me and you,
Well,
Matt, we're both tall guys, but we're not exactly worth the first
my
overall
trade
pick
value is in the gutter.
at a pickup game. Although I will say, if you're under the age of 12 and you're playing like at the Y and pick up basketball and I'm there, you probably are not having a great day if I'm on you.
Bol can shoot though. He can do a lot of things, but I think it's pretty bold. It's the same thing with the Cam Reddish trade with Bol, where it's like he didn't get drafted till the second round, and then he plays on a super injured team that still won't give him minutes. And I'm not saying that he's for sure bad or he won't develop, but I feel like that does represent him as a player, at least somewhat. Although that's not a very fun take to have. The Bol isn't good, so
No,
I
it's
didn't
not very
actually say
fun at
that.
all. Not very fun at all. The other trade, of course, was Cam Reddish to the Knicks move that we talked a little bit about on the podcast, but maybe we could talk a little bit more about it here. Matt, you went on a long, lengthy explanation about about why this trade wasn't as bad as everyone thought it was. But want to do it again?
Yeah, I do. I feel very strongly about this. This is like my number one thing right now is that the understanding of how contracts in the NBA is totally ruined.
Yeah.
I don't, if Cam Reddish plays well, like if he puts up 18, 20 a game, he will get the max. That is Miles Bridges, he will get the max. Those teams have
Yes.
there's a reason why Reddish is overrated, probably a little bit, and I still think he can be a great player. But as a prospect, he's probably just a hair overrated right now. Um, it's just if Cam Reddish wasn't due for a big payday if he played well, then somebody would have beaten that Knicks offer. Like
Yes.
nobody beat that Knicks offer for a reason. When it's not like he has 20, he costs $25 million now and it makes it hard to trade for him. He's the easiest player to trade for. A lot of teams could use him. A lot of teams would want him. He's got a ton of potential, but um like it's not that every team other than the Knicks is stupid. There's a reason for it.
Yeah, we're talking about the Knicks here. The notoriously the notorious and
Yeah, it's like the
famously
Knicks
well-run
outsmarted.
Knicks have outsmarted the whole league.
Um, and it's just it's a lot like Michael Porter Jr. You know, um, where I'm not saying they're similar play style wise because they're not at all. But let's say Reddish does play kind of up to the standard he's going to be held to in New York or whatever. Um, if he's a young guy who's kind of more injury prone but has a ton of upside, we've seen what how much guys like that can get, and he's going to get that too.
Right.
But there,
Yeah, no, I think about like, yeah, a good example is both both the Suns bridges and the Hornets bridges. You don't think of them as like all-star caliber players right now. So it's like, okay, if you're not one of the best in the league, you're probably not going to get paid like one of the best in the league. But it's like, think about this, no matter what team you're a fan of, could you use bridges on your team? The answer for all 32 teams is yes, or 30 teams. It's not the NFL. So it's like, if you're just a really high level role player or someone who has the potential to just like be immensely helpful, it's just like that skill set is going to be, there's a bidding war that happens because every single team wants a guy like that. And every single team thinks, that's something we could do. Like maybe it's not a super max or like a Luka type of contract, but it's not too far below those kinds of things just because the demand for good players is just that high. And when it's not like James Harden or like his top five type of player, everyone thinks they can get it. Like, oh, he's a little bit underrated. But if everyone thinks you're underrated, you're just properly valued. And if everyone is willing to pay for it, like you get overrated real quick because it's like
well,
yeah.
it's always like people don't disagree. If you think somebody is an overpay, then in my opinion, you should be of the opinion that they would be better off not signing them, period. Because signing them it's like, look at the Hornets, for example. Miles Bridges is going to be the perfect example.
Yeah.
Right? Where
Cam
it's going to be
Johnson on
like
the Suns as well.
he's going to get Miles Bridges is going to get the max. He's not an all-star player, but he has the potential to get there. And I think the expectation is that he will be an all-star at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the Hornets' best option would be to pay him and give him the max, because in a sign and trade, you never get even close to value back. And it wouldn't, saving that money wouldn't open up any other options for the Hornets. And so he's worth the max, because that's just how NBA team building goes. If you try to trade him, you get way less value, you get way worse. And you can't sign him to just a smaller contract. That's not an option. And letting him walk doesn't open up that money, because you can go into the luxury tax.
Yeah.
And because those guys get paid for their potential and have that leverage where the other team has no better option, that's what leads to them getting the max. But people see the max as something that should only go to like the top 5-10 players. So it's the best option for the Hornets to give him the max, but it'll get called an overpay anyway.
Right. There's another trade that is heating up right now. I see some people mentioning it in the chat, is Sabonis to the Kings for De'Aaron Fox, which to me is like the smallest big trade that could ever happen. Like the most insignificant blockbuster of all time would be that.
I'm a fan of it. I like it. A lot of people are just, I saw a lot, I'm getting a lot of hate. Like, it's just a lateral move. And it kind of is. There's some people who will think that it's maybe Fox is way better. Some people would think Sabonis is way better. But at the end of the day, the Pacers' big problem they're trying to solve is that Sabonis and Turner don't work together. And the problem that the Kings are trying to solve is that they have too many guards. So if it is a lateral move, it kind of does work out for both teams. I also think there's a potential that, like, if the Pacers really want to just blow it up, which is probably what I would do, you could have Fox go to the Celtics, and then the Celtics send some sort of like pick package to the Pacers, and still keep the Kings involved in that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's just tough to not go anywhere. Like the Kings have been spinning their wheels since like the 1950s. So like that's nothing new. But like the Pacers, even more so, where they've avoided the suck realm, but like what is that really after a while? It's like, oh great, we're not the worst team in basketball, but they're not going anywhere, right? So it definitely makes sense. And I think you've got two, like you said, like kind of more offensive minded bigs in Turner and Sabonis, where it's like kind of redundant a little bit. And they're going to trade both of them, Sabonis to the Kings, and of course Turner to the Hornets. So when De'Aaron Fox and I don't even know who the Hornets would trade, Gordon Hayward link up, and is that a better spot to be in?
I don't know. The thing that kills me about the Sabonis trade is like, it means no Miles Turner for the Hornets. I wouldn't be against trading for Sabonis. I would not be against giving up Gordon Hayward for Sabonis at all. But I don't even think that's close to even value. I'd be willing to give Hayward and BJ for Sabonis. Talk about
Yeah,
how Oladipo stay haircut a sport. Yeah, we both did get haircuts.
we both did good haircuts. We were both stay. Talk about how Oladipo is non-existent. I always forget that guy's in the league. He's right. I mean, he's been
he
hurt
was
for
so good. People, he was like all NBA. He was insanely good.
Yeah, no, he was. And the Heat are the number 2 team in the East without him. Like if they had like him 70% of what he was, I mean, I said this before. They were my pick to win the East before the season, and I was kind of banking on him maybe getting healthy eventually, but I don't know if it's ever going to happen. But yes, no, Oladipo he's a really good singer, you know, and was a good basketball player, but maybe they could get him involved by having him sing the national anthem before some of these Heat games. You know, I feel bad.
Who did they used to have do that? There was some player who did that. I can't remember their name.
Really? That's awesome.
Yeah. There's a. Do you guys know who I'm talking about in chat? If somebody can remind me. I'd appreciate
our
it.
Producer. We got Bladen is not producing this one. Who used to sing the national anthem as a player? But yeah, Heat. Anyway, even without Oladipo, I think the Heat are really serious contenders to win the East. I mean, they're second in the East right now. They just got Bam Adebayo back, and I just love the way this team is built. Like I said before the season, it's just a bunch of winners. Lowry, you know, a number 2 option on a championship team. Jimmy Butler has been the number 1 option on a championship team. The Heat were in the finals recently, so it's like everyone there just kind of knows what it takes to win. You've got Hero playing really well. Kind of is able to kind of come off the bench now and provide a spark there, scoring. They've got a decoy candidate in Bam. It's like this is just a team that when in the final 5 minutes of a close game, like who are you trusting more? The team with all these like just some of the biggest tryhards the NBA has to offer, and just like I just trust them to just like be a boa constrictor in close games when it gets late, and just like have a bunch of the savviest dudes at that because they can just clamp you and just the moment's just never going to be too big for that collection of talent in Miami. I love the Heat. Love the Heat.
I think it's a take that could end up aging very well.
Yeah.
The Heat are definitely underrated. I think they're serious players in the East.
Yeah.
And I would be, you can have a really tough path. You could have to play like the 76ers, the Heat, and the Bucks if you're the Nets and you want to make it to the finals, which is just brutal. Or you could have to play the Cavs, and then it's not easy this year.
Yeah, the days of the East being like, oh, you played in the East, it was so easy. That those days that was always kind of an overrated narrative in my opinion. But I mean, those days I think are far over because it's a tough path. It's a tough path.
It's tough to say. My fear with the Nets being top heavy, is less about just like how that team is built and more about being top heavy is hard to deal with when it comes to injuries.
Right.
But if Kyrie, James Harden, and Kevin Durant are all healthy, I don't think anybody's beating that team still.
I'd agree. But it's like we've talked about this a ton of times before where it's like
big if.
Huge if. Injury players get hurt. Injury prone players get hurt. That they just do. That happens. Oladipo is one. You just can't rely on them to be healthy, and you always think it's going to be different, and a lot of the times it's just not. So, but you could say the same thing about the Heat. At this point, Jimmy Butler's been injured. He's pretty old. Bam Adebayo has dealt with his share of injuries. Lowry's getting up there in age, although he's usually pretty, sturdy and doesn't miss a ton of time. So maybe he's not injury prone, but you could maybe say the same thing about the Heat. And I think they match up decently with the Bucks. I saw a thing with that. I mean, 2 years ago when they made that finals run, they beat the Bucks in 5. And then they obviously got swept last year. But I think the real answer is somewhere in the middle. It's like it's not that they match up horribly with the Bucks. The Bucks just got really, really hot shooting last year. I think if you're gonna have a guy on Giannis, Bam is just about as good as you can ask for. Not that he's a total Giannis stopper, but he's got as good a shot as anybody. Bam Adebayo, and they can match him on defense and offense. I don't think that it's a horrible matchup, even though they got swept last year. If the Bucks and Heat were to match up in the playoffs again, I would almost guarantee it would not be a sweep for the Bucks again. I think that the Heat are going to be really tough
I
out.
would strongly agree.
Yeah.
And I do think the Bucks improved from where they were 2 years ago, but we've seen that series be heavily lopsided both ways. So I kind of want to see that play out a third time and see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the lame answer to this question is it'll be whoever of like the top 4 teams is the healthiest. But that's probably true.
It probably is.
And I would say
that's always how it is. I don't want to. It's like we did that. We did that video. It's like there's always the talk about like Mickey Mouse ring. Like, oh, they had an injured path. It's like
it's literally every season.
Every single you could go back to like the Spurs versus Heat in like 2014 is like the last time everyone was like healthy. Like the Warriors won a ring, and Dellavedova was like the number 2 option on the Cavs in 2015, and then it was the Durant years, and then it was like Curry and Clay who got. Or like Clay got banged up when the Raptors series, it's like, oh my God, every ring is a Mickey Mouse ring. If like anything going wrong, like gets screwed up.
No,
so
the only ring that I think is like truly just straight Mickey Mouse is probably 2015. It count, like, don't get me wrong, counts, but like, as somebody who was rooting for LeBron, it is impossible for me to be like, yeah, he lost. No.
Yeah.
It was like, I still had, dude, Kelly Olynyk with the Kevin Love stuff, that still bothers me to this day. But yeah, nice. That's the way it is. I mean, then there's been finals where you could say the same thing about 2016 for the Cavs, although to a much, much lesser extent. Or in 2020, the Lakers played a hurt Heat team. So it's something you can say always. I could just kind of judge it by like how bad it is. It definitely varies.
Yeah, no, you always like to see 2, high level teams fully healthy go against each other. But like everyone called the Suns Mickey Mouse last year, and I thought that was so silly just because, like, yes, they avoided a lot of the top tier talent, and yes, they lost in the finals, but they were a number 2 seed in the East. In the West, they're the number 1 seed this year. Like, it was pretty clear that they were like a really, really well built team that deserved to be there. It wasn't like anyway. It will come down to who's the most healthy. It always does. It always does. Which is the great.
I've got a question. I've got a question for you that maybe isn't super basketball related, but
okay.
So you know how every time a guy has a good player and gets a PD, one of those PED tests, it's always like, oh, surprise, surprise, right? Do you genuinely buy into the fact that like the NFL or the NBA drug test players randomly, but not really randomly, based off if they like go and have a great performance or do something crazy athletic? Or do you think it's just totally random?
I don't think it's totally random. Look, if I was the NFL, I don't blame them for like maybe drug testing Aaron Donald and Myles Garrett a little bit more. like they are just so crazy jacked and ripped. It's like, okay, if anyone is doing it, it might be those 2 because they're just like so freaking gigantic. And if you're going to drug test the like most ripped player, if you're gonna like maybe send some of the guys who are just like a little too jacked, like a little more drug tests, they're like those random drug tests are probably going to come after a really good game because they're really good players, like the odds that Aaron Donald or Myles Garrett, because Myles Garrett's the example always in the NFL, at least, it's like the odds that Myles Garrett gets a random drug test after doing something really good is a lot higher than, I don't know, Dean Lowry having a random drug test after doing something really good. like they just do really good things a lot. So their drug tests probably come after doing really good. So I think that they're not like, oh, we're just gonna, drug test every good player. I would say like maybe some of the like top level athletes get it a little bit more just because, you know, if it's a performance enhancing drug, the players on them probably are playing with an enhanced type of performance. So, but I don't think they're like, oh wow, what a sack from Garrett. Send that man a drug. I don't think that that's how that works. I think it's a little bit more random than maybe
I
that.
do see. I like if you were like the NFL, I could totally see them doing it. But I also think even if the drug test were totally random, this would be a narrative because every time, guy, I know they hate taking them. It's got to be so annoying.
Right.
Um, so it's like eventually, I don't know how many drug tests are given out each week, but that's going to coincide with someone playing a good game. Um, pretty often you'd figure just
Yeah,
just by like random chance.
I agree.
Um,
Look,
so I don't
if
know. I was thinking
did
about.
John Morant get one after that block that he had, the one that was like at the top of the backboard and like the crazy, the block I'm talking
I didn't
about?
see it. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I didn't see anything about
Yeah,
that.
if he
So
didn't get a random drug test after that play, it's totally random. Because I would if like if you're sending drug tests to someone who's like a little bit too good of an athlete, like and showing it for a game, you're getting a random drug test after that one, Josh. Sorry. So yeah,
where's Matt's hat? One of my New Year's resolutions is to wear hats less. Not
wow.
to not wear them entirely, but I don't want to be a hat guy anymore, even though it's in my Twitter
Yeah, I
bio.
was about to say, are you gonna change your Twitter bio?
I do. I need to because it's still got the Desmond Ritter Heisman thing in there.
Yeah, and it also
Um,
says typo king, even though I have way more typos than you.
stop, stop.
I do.
I get it's it's just something I put in there. So it's so embarrassing when you have like a good tweet and you have a typo. You ever have that like moment where you have to decide between whether or not you're
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
delete it
And
and
then
put
you
it
have to
back up?
decide
And
to delete it. I usually do delete, and then I'll tweet again, and everyone's like, "We
it's like
saw the
we saw
first one,
that, we
bro.
saw that,
We saw
I
the first
know.
one. I caught you." Okay, thanks. Anyway, back to basketball. One of my great theories is one person I don't like is always Rudy Gobert. Even though like statistically you're not going to find any argument that I'm right ever. But I think part of the reason that this is true is I just don't like the guy personally. Like I think that he is an annoying person. And maybe that's because he's French and French people are assholes usually. Sorry, French people. Actually, I don't know if that's true, but that's like the stereotype. Maybe that's just, French culture is being a little abrasive. All right. I don't want to like no disrespect. It's just like that's just the stereotype. I don't know if anyone knows any French people in the chat who can confirm.
No disrespect,
Are
but I hate French people.
I don't
Yeah,
hate French people. I'm just saying, like, French people have the reputation of being kind of mean. All right.
they do. They do have that reputation. I can't. I don't think I've ever met a single. No, I've met a couple of French people, but I've never. I don't think I've ever like hung out with a French person, so I wouldn't know.
I know two French people. I think I knew a girl named Elise who was French and she was nice. And then I knew a kid named Robin who I think was nice, but I knew him in like fourth grade. So I don't know. All right. If you're French, I'm not saying you've been to okay, some people look, if you're French, I'm not saying that I'm just saying that's the stereotype. All right. And Rudy Gobert seems to fit the stereotype. I think that he is, I don't think his teammates like Rudy Gobert. I don't think Donovan Mitchell likes Rudy Gobert. I don't think that Rudy Gobert likes Donovan Mitchell. You've got like, there was one time where he just like, I think it was, he got in a fight with Miles Turner this year where he just like was falling down to the ground and just like tackled Miles Turner. And then there's like the wiping his hands on the mics as a COVID thing. And he just seems like an annoying person to me. This is the Rudy Gobert slander. And it's not because he's French. It's just because of the things I just said. It's like tackling people and the COVID thing was just kind of a really harsh look for him. But I think that like there's chemistry problems with the Jazz because I look at the Jazz and I think like this should be a Heat caliber. Like this team should be the Suns. This team should be the Heat, where they just have so many. Like they don't have like a top 10 player in the league, but they're just so good everywhere that they should just be firing on all cylinders and just be a buzzsaw. But I think the thing about the Heat and I think the thing with the Suns is their chemistry. Everyone likes each other and everyone's fully bought in to the team. And I think with the Jazz, sometimes you see this where even though they've got all these really good players and there shouldn't be a huge weakness, they just haven't bought in like all the way. It's weird. I don't know. That's kind of a tangent, but yeah.
I I think I agree with a good portion of it. Rudy Gobert does not seem to be liked. It does not seem. I don't think him and Donovan Mitchell get along.
Yes.
And you can try to like fake that type of stuff and be like, I'm just gonna, but it doesn't work long term. Um,
And it's obvious when it's happened. Like it's obvious when it's happening. And some people will be like, oh no, like look at this press conference. They asked him straight up, do you like Donovan Mitchell? And he said, yes, I don't have a problem. Like that's a lot. Like they obviously are gonna say that. It's like
mm-hmm.
it's you got to read between the lines. And this is how like Joe Judge was always going to be bad because like the stories like behind the scenes were like not great, or even they would come out with Zimmer a little bit, or a lot of times with coaches like Flores and Tua. Like it just always like there was just like things that would leak out and people don't take them seriously enough. They're like, oh, it's just the lying media trying to stir up some drama. And it's like not a lot of the times, like when these stories leak out, there's someone doing it and there's a reason why it's happening. And that's like why I think the Jazz, like, I don't know. I don't know. The Jazz have some problems.
Well, and the other part is kind of just like their play style would be very frustrating if you're Rudy Gobert. I've thought about this recently. So the Jazz's perimeter defense is garbage,
Yes.
but it works in the regular season because they trust Gobert so much on the inside, but it puts 100% of the defensive pressure on him. And if there's ever a mistake, who is getting blamed for it? Rudy Gobert. So he's like the most valuable defender, at least as far as the regular season goes, in the NBA, or one of them. But he gets like defensively more hate than pretty much any other defender in the league outside of like maybe Trae Young. And he never gets the respect he deserves. And the team is always good. And it's always in large part because of him. And he's always the fall guy. And it's just that would be very frustrating. Um, I'm not saying that he's necessarily like the good guy or he's like put upon, but I think if you were him, you'd be very upset. The other problem that the Jazz have is they're just not quite talented enough. Like they just don't like who is they're very good, but it's like we talked about this last time where they're in the position they totally could make a major move and have sort of like a big three and try to make a win now move, and they just won't, and they keep being like very good and not
Yeah.
great.
And I think defense is again kind of something. If everyone buys in, you'll have a good defense. Like if everyone just totally believes in the vision of the like defense is effort. Like that's kind of a thing where it's like if you just want it, you can be a good defender. And I think that has to do with kind of buying in. And when you maybe don't love your work environment, you're not going to give it your all to see that team winning, like, and I think Gobert said this in an interview where he's like, I really respect the Suns because when I watch them, everyone is bought in and it's clear that they have like put everything else aside and have want to win a championship. And he said something like, I think it should be more like that here, or he was implying that it wasn't like that in Utah, which is just so fascinating to me. Is like all the different like when you read between, I love reading between the lines and trying to figure out which situations are toxic. I love trying to like determine stuff like that, and this is definitely one of those situations. And I guess the other thing about Utah, what was I going to say? Oh, and the problem with Gobert and why he has this reputation is because other NBA players seem to like always take shots at him. Like I remember Durant was on like JJ Redick's podcast and he was like, I see some, you know, defensive player of the years who get picked on in the play, and it was like pretty obvious in the playoffs. And he was like kind of talking about Gobert because he had just won and he had like just gotten kind of picked on in the playoffs. And like when the Lakers played the Jazz the other night, I think it was like Stanley Johnson like came up and was like, yeah, we decided to pick on Gobert. Like we were like thought like if you went at Gobert, he wouldn't have like they would just like some NBA players don't seem to give Gobert his flowers like they do like Drew Holiday. They're always talking about how good Drew Holiday is at defense. And like NBA players, I think, are at the heart of like the Gobert disrespect. And I think Kevin Durant is the main one for what he said on JJ Redick's
Well,
podcast.
Kevin Durant, a lot of Kevin Durant's stuff, his whole GOAT argument is that he's like the most skilled player of all time.
Yeah.
But so NBA players other NBA players who are good at basketball, like good, skilled at basketball. It's like, when, that's a big reason why, obviously he was great too, but Kobe gets so much respect, or
Right.
Kevin Durant gets so much respect, or Kyrie gets so much respect. Rudy Gobert is not a hooper. He's a basketball player.
Right. Exactly.
And he gets on every all-star team, and it's because that guy's, graphs are a big part of why people think he's so good. And I don't disagree.
Durant loves when people talk about graphs in a basketball conversation, famously.
Yeah, it's that type of stuff. And it's like,
yeah.
Otherwise, if I don't know how much people would really respect Gobert. It's also partially because, bigs like Gobert are worse off in the playoffs, and the offensive game isn't quite there. So even the years that he does win DPOY, he's probably not the number one defender you would pick for your team in a playoff series. So there's just a lot going against him.
Yeah. We had Rusty Buckets on a while ago, the podcast, which was one of my favorite podcast moments of all time. Was we were doing Contender or Pretender, and like the word Utah had just left my mouth, and like immediately was like, no, fuck that. Like, I'm so fucking sick and tired of hearing about them as contenders. Like, just immediately shut them down as like, oh yeah, they're just the same old Jazz, and they might put up some numbers in the regular season because they are a deep team, and they have, last year famously like 2 6 man of the year candidates, and a really good player in Donovan Mitchell, and a really good defender in Gobert. But once the lights get bright, I just don't think they're bought in enough. Like the Suns, every team should be like the Suns. My greatest take, my one basketball take. Also, Wiggins owns Gobert. I might gotta add that. Gobert gets dunked on, like he'll get dunked on by Westbrook or Wiggins, and then the whole thing will like his reputation will just like reset every time that happens. Yeah.
And they need, if they are serious, if they're really serious about winning a championship, they'll probably do the whole, we're going to trade all the picks.
Yeah.
And try to go get somebody. And it's a little tough because you're in Utah.
Yeah.
Admittedly.
You're in Utah.
But people always, like, I'm pretty sure they have all their picks. People underestimate how valuable the whole like 4 picks, 3 pick swaps for the next 7 years is. And even though Brooklyn did that and it killed them, it crushed them for like a decade.
It did.
People still undervalue that because it doesn't look valuable right away. It takes a few years.
Yeah. No, I agree. Other NBA things. Jeremiah Grant, some people have mentioned him, and he's been a big trade piece that people have talked about. He's on. I'm not the world's biggest Jeremiah Grant knower, but yeah. What are you? So I'll throw it over to you.
I saw somebody say earlier, and maybe there's a quote about this, that Jeremy Grant is like, wants to be like a number 1 option.
Right.
I don't know if there's any truth to that. I like Grant a lot. I don't think he's quite the scorer that the points per game maybe says for Jeremy Grant, but he's one of those guys who like is so valuable because he'll fit on any team. He's a solid defender, and he plays into his role. It says he wants to be a number 1 option. He's just not. He doesn't have a bag like that, unfortunately. But I thinking
of teams where he would be the number 1 option. I'm thinking like the Pistons.
Yeah, it's like he's the number 1 option.
The Magic.
He's
And
I
yeah,
I would even wonder if Jeremy Grant is really like a third option on a championship team. Probably not. Maybe there's a few cases where you could see it, but I'd say probably not. He's kind of in between. Like, he's more than a role player, but he's not really a star player either. He's that weirdo in between. He's very, very good though. There's a lot of teams that he would make much, much better just with his size and athleticism and shooting ability and things like that. When you have a guy who can shoot well and can play the four, and is switchable on defense, there's not a team in the world that wouldn't want that guy to start for them. You feel like he isn't going to be traded. The Pistons would be dumb not to trade him. I mean, his value will never be better. He's on a good contract. Um, there's a lot of parity right now, so a lot of teams are going to be after him. You want to get something serious back, but I would move him.
yeah, for sure. I honestly think he might be the best dude on. Like, Simmons is a guy everyone talks about, and Simmons has made all-star games, but there's just so much unknowns with Simmons. Like, if you could get one guy who's on the block right now. I mean, Fox, Sabonis, they're really good, but you think like Fox is a guard who can't shoot, got to beat those allegations where it's like, okay, how are you a number, like where are you? And Sabonis is a big who's not a great defender. It's like, man, if I could have any of these guys, Jeremy Grant might be that guy. But again, if he doesn't want to accept a role where he's not number one, it gets tough. I don't know. That's weird. I don't know where you trade him
As far as him being the guy back in Simmons, I mean, I don't know if you saw that trade offer, and I don't know whether it's true or not, that the Pistons made, where it was like a pick plus Grant plus Kelly Olynyk plus Sadiq Bey. And the 76ers said no. And I think that they are just looking for, like, it has to be somebody who can be the second best player on a championship team, or they will not make the move. They want like one of the top 30 players in the league, or they will not make the move. They don't care. They will not make the move. But then it's like, I don't know where that is outside of like Beal is or like, I guess Lillard, but he's hurt right now. And we know that Portland's not going to do that. So I have no idea how the Simmons stuff is going to play out, but I don't know if I would say no to what the Pistons offered, depending on what else is on the table, because it's not bad. And I really like Sadiq Bey too.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I mean, I think they look at it like we've got an all-star who's young, who, has like a young all-star is about the most valuable thing that you can have, like, but Simmons is just not a normal young all-star. Like,
Simmons may become one of those players that a lot of people back up. I'm seeing, but like he never proves him right. And
yeah,
it's tough with him because it's like any given time he could just change how he played and he would be better. He's got the skill set to be good right now. He doesn't even need to be able to shoot, but he just doesn't do that. So I don't even know what his trade value is, and you have to build around him. So he's so difficult to evaluate. But I would say, to me, his value is probably a little bit lower among NBA circles than people think.
yeah.
The
Simmons and
concept of
Cade
Simmons is
Cunningham
better
would
than
be an interesting duo if that were to go through. I mean, that's a big like guard duo. If you trotted those guys out there, and then like a decent front court, like that is a big lineup, and two skilled guards. Like that'd be really interesting to me. If he went to Detroit and they could just go like tall ball, like these crazy big lineups of playmakers. I think that would actually be a really interesting fit. So
and
it's unfortunate that didn't go through, because I would have been really interested to see how Detroit built around two just gigantic playmaking guards. I think that would have been a cool team.
yeah, I agree. Again, with Simmons, he's either got to be more aggressive, he's got to be in the dunker spot, and like, oh, he can guard the 1 through 5. Is that really true? Like, can he actually play the 5? Because he kind of, or at least the 4, because he kind of needs to be in that dunker spot, sort of. Or he needs to be able to shoot aggressive or whatever.
Yeah.
But it would be cool to see him in a kind of a different environment if you were to mix up his play style. But I just don't trust him to. I have no faith in him to do that because he's burned the 76ers too many times. And it's the mental stuff on top of that. I mean, if you can't trust him to be any good in the playoffs, how can you possibly trade a huge player for him, like the level of player that the 76ers want? I also think that Pistons trade would have made the Sixers like a hilariously like deep team that doesn't have like a true consistent second option.
Yes. Yes. We got to comment. What are your thoughts on the Wolves? And I'll talk about the Timberwolves just because as a Minnesota native, I do like the Timberwolves, and I would like the city of Minneapolis to have a winning sports team because they usually just get heartbreak. That is not the Minnesota Vikings as a Packer fan. The Wolves are always interesting to me because it's like in my whole entire life, they haven't been good since I was like 5 years old. So I just was always kind of mentally checked out on them, and that's why I'm not a huge fan of them. I like the Suns more since moving down here. But before this, they had Ryan Saunders. They always have like this roster where it's like, man, there's a lot of talent on that roster with D'Lo and Cat, and you get all these high picks, and Culver, like they always had these high picks, and Cat was a bona fide star, and they got D'Lo, but they underperformed last year for two reasons, and that was injuries, and Ryan Saunders was just not that guy. I mean, Flip Saunders was his dad, and that was tragic when he passed away, young, and it was a very nice moment when they gave the coaching gig to his son, but his son was not Ryan Saunders was just not an NBA coach. He's just not that good. So the coaching was a problem, and their big three only played like a couple games healthy together. So it was just tough to get a read on how they would do this year because, like, it seemed like they could do pretty good this year because their coaching was definitely going to be better, and their health was definitely going to be better. But it's just a tough thing to ever bet on the Timberwolves because they're just always bad. But they're in the playoffs right now, and I think that if they're off to that kind of start, like, we're about halfway through the season, aren't we? If they're in the playoffs halfway through the season, I think they can keep it up. Like, that's already kind of ahead of schedule. If it was just same old Timberwolves, they wouldn't be at this spot. They'd be 14 and whatever. So yeah, and they have to make the playoffs because if they don't, Cat's gone. D'Lo's probably gone. Like there's just no way Cat stays if they miss the playoffs again. And there's just only so long a player like that can go in a dysfunctional organization that doesn't make the playoffs. So this is an absolutely must not only make the playoffs, but like be competitive in the series that they get into. Like if they can make the playoffs and they get bounced in 4 or 5, even then I think Cat might move on. But if they're in a playoff series and they make it a real thing, then I think maybe they'll keep going and they're on the right track. So yeah.
I agree. It is tough to say what Cat does after this year a little bit. I think that well, you look at the Timberwolves and it's like their offense should be so much better than it is now. And it's like Anthony Edwards is getting so much better, so much faster. It's like, I don't know. They're just so close to being if they get another year, maybe they'll figure it out. But they may not. It's tough.
They may not. They may not get that another year. And I wouldn't blame Cat if he didn't want to give them another year after this year, they are in the play in and not the playoff. Yes, that's true. I forgot, like 7, 10, 8, 9 is all kind of but they are a top, like right now they are a top 8 seed, so
yeah.
And they got off to a really poor start this year, so they've been hot recently. So they can probably climb their way above. I don't know if they can climb their way above the Nuggets, Mavericks, Jazz, Grizzlies, Warriors, Suns. So they may be in that plan. But they got to make the playoffs. They can't lose the plan. That's for sure.
Hey man, if I ever go bald, I'm getting the toupee. I don't care. I was watching some Seinfeld the other day, and we were looking at George, and he had a toupee, and I'm like, they're making fun of it. Looks good, looks great.
Does look great.
It was a look. So
it is. There shouldn't be that much shame in it, like if girls get makeup and that's normalized, guys should get toupees and not be
Yes,
made fun of.
absolutely.
It's the same thing, you know?
Um, talk about the Bulls. I feel like we've talked about the Bulls a ton. Like them a lot. They're really good. Big question is DeMar, can you play this good in the playoffs? And I think that having the extra spacing will be a big difference for him. And I also think that with that many guys who can go and create their own shot and create offense, that you can get a game or two of maybe not high level DeMar and survive it in a 7-game series. Whereas with, the Raptors teams that he used to play on, it would be like, if he isn't making shots, they're not winning. And
Right.
the spacing was not great on those teams.
Yeah,
So
I would
I'm
agree.
not.
And I think, Zach Levine is a guy where he's not their best player right now. It is DeMar DeRozan. Like, he is playing the best on their team right now. But I mean, Zach Levine truly is the centerpiece there, and they built around him and they added DeMar to that. So I anticipate Zach Levine when he gets to play. I always thought about Zach Levine a little bit like Booker, where it's like Booker was always on these horrible teams, and then when he got in the playoffs, he balled out. Like he wasn't not a winner. He just didn't have the team around him. And I kind of feel Zach Levine is the same way. As like, you put this guy in the playoffs, I think that he is going to put up some real numbers. And I feel like my prediction right now is, because they will make the playoffs. If Levine is healthy, I know he screwed up his knee the other day, but I don't think it's serious. I think Zach Levine will be their best player in the playoffs, and I think that's okay. They won't need it to be DeMar. I think Zach Levine is the guy. Like, DeMar is the guy who's saving them right now, right? And DeMar is the dude who's just balling out right now. But Zach Levine is truly, when you get down to it, the future, the present, and the brief past of the Bulls, and he will reveal himself at some point to truly be the best player there. That's what I think.
I think Levine and DeMar have played pretty comparably.
Yeah, no,
Good recently. Um, Levine, DeMar's getting a lot of hype, but you go look at the numbers. I mean, they're very, very close in a lot of things. The true shooting's close. The usage rate is close, which is the big thing. And it's like, okay, have they gone to DeMar just the total one option? Because I don't think they were. Bulls fans will be like, how wrong people were about the DeMar signing and whatever. And don't get me wrong, I don't disagree. People were so wrong about that. DeMar was always never the worst signing, but I don't even think the Bulls expected DeMar to be this good.
no.
I don't think nobody understood that. I don't think anybody knew DeMar was going to be this good, or that he was going to have, be the number one option on the team ahead of Levine is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And I agree. I think it'll be a mix. When you have high level shot creators like that, and not only for themselves but for other players on the team, you don't say we're going just Levine, we're going just DeMar. You say, who's hot, who's playing well today, who's the better option. And that's what makes the Bulls so dangerous, is that they've got 4 guys and you really can just lean on whoever's playing the best, or whichever 2 are playing the best in a given game. So I just think the Bulls are a better situation for DeMar than he's ever been in before, playoff wise. There's less pressure on him to be good. And there's better spacing, which is important for a guy who's not a great 3-point shooter.
Agreed. Are you worried about Vucevic in the playoffs due to his defense? We talked a little bit about Gobert in the playoffs, and Gobert is obviously a much better defender than Vucevic. Like, playoff Bulls with DeMar kind of struggling there, and Vucevic's defense. Do you worry about them maybe as a team that could potentially get first rounded if they draw the wrong team?
So, I mean, someone's got to go out in the first round. Right now they're the 1 seed, so probably not.
True.
Their defense is still pretty good this year, all things considered. It just really sucks they don't have Pat Williams. It bothers me. But I think their perimeter defense is good enough, so where I'm not so scared. But that's probably their weakness, is that they don't have that sort of mobile, switchable big like Giannis or Bam or Anthony Davis or one of those guys. Because if they did, then I would say that they were going to come out of the East.
Mm-hmm.
Who's just going to get sunned by Giannis or Joel? And I mean, yeah, that's probably their biggest fear. But even then, I think the way that you beat the Bucks is that you get Chris Middleton cold or Drew Holiday not playing well, not even as much as stopping Giannis because you're not gonna.
Which is going to get sunned by Giannis or Joel. Yeah, which could get sunned by if you really wanted Jeremy Grant, whoever's the like 8 seed. If you think you're going to draw the Bulls, I mean, obviously you'd have to like do some projecting, but like if you think you could sneak into the playoffs at the end, you had Jeremy Grant on Vooch. I don't know if you're the 8 seed in the East, which is what the Sixers would be. You would kind of want, although Embiid is good enough to do that by himself, I guess. But anyway,
do you guys think that Wiggins is an all-star?
No, I don't.
He's really good. But he's playing really good.
He's not an all-star,
I don't think.
But
I'll say this, you know, if Warrior fans go crazy and they make everybody an all-star like they wanted to, then the narrative 10 years from now would be that how much help Curry had, because look at all these all-stars. So I'm not even, it may be better off for the sake of Curry narratives, not to give him an all-star.
Right. But, you know, yeah, true. It depends on if you're a Curry fan or Warriors. Because you want Wiggins, like, if you're a Warriors fan, you should also want Wiggins to, like, succeed and not just Curry, you know? Like, you should be concerned about Wiggins' well-being as well and get him an all-star if you're a real Warriors fan and not be worried too much about debates that are happening 10 years down the line here. You know? Wiggins is interesting, though, because, dude, like I said, from Minnesota, no, a ton of Timberwolves fans, they hated Wiggins. They hated when he got traded from Minnesota. It was like a national holiday for Timberwolves fans because they were so sick of him. And they're all just sick that he's this good now because he was always supposed to be in Minnesota as the number 1 pick. Like, this is always what Wiggins was supposed to be. And he just never got there, which again goes back to coaching, like I was talking about.
All NBA narratives are expectation based. Yeah. Like, the reason why Wiggins was hated wasn't because he was never like a terrible player. He was never awful or anything. He was just not as he was getting called like, you know, like Michael Jordan. He was a crazy prospect. I mean, he was a great prospect even for a number 1 overall pick. He was incredibly highly rated.
Yes.
So he missed out on expectations so much. That's why people were frustrated with him. I think he's becoming a better player, but I think if you put him back on like the Timberwolves with the expectations that he needs to be like a franchise savior, you'd have the same thing happen. I feel bad because NBA narratives are getting to Ja Morant. He is this close to being one of those dudes who just gets called overrated all the time because people talk about him too much.
Yes, he is close to that. He is very close. I saw someone, they posted ESPN posted a highlight and he was guarding some guy and the guy shot and it went in. Like, they made a 3 on Ja Morant, but Ja jumped like freakishly high. Like, it was a great shot, but ESPN posted him just for like jumping really high. And I was like, oh, you are playing with fire.
They know what, and they do it on purpose. Here's the general cycle of what happens. There's be a player that everybody likes or is very exciting or is on a good team or whatever. And they'll start playing really well. And then ESPN will catch on to this and they'll start posting them a bunch because the only thing they don't care about like respecting the players who are like, they just want whatever gets the most interactions. Right. So they start posting them a bunch. And if that player keeps playing well, they keep getting more and more hype until one of these like hot take shows picks up on it. And all of a sudden you look online and somebody's call, like you'll see the Stephen A take, oh, I think I'd rather have Ja than Giannis in the playoffs. And then even though nobody on NBA Twitter agrees with that, and even though Stephen A is obviously just like, you know, coming up with something to say, right?
Yeah.
People will say like, oh, now this player is getting too much hype. He's too talked about. Now he sucks. Now he's overrated. So now you've got this really great player who's considered overrated. And then eventually so many people start hitting on him that it goes back to normal. But it happened to Hero super bad. There's always a rookie it happens to. It was LaMelo last year. It was Who was it the year before that?
Zion. I mean, Zion was
Zion,
one.
super bad.
Yeah, it happened to him. But yeah, no, you're right. Where it's like, someone always like. I mean, we know how it works here. We're sort of in the industry of how companies want to just generate stuff that people are talking about. Like, oh, this is really big right now. We want to hit a little bit on that. Like every company at the end of the day wants to turn a profit, and doing that you've got to make some clickbait, and people can't quite recognize that for exactly what it is a lot of the time if you're not plugged in or quite understand how everything works with like that. So when you hear a pretty blatant example of it,
Yeah.
I wish people could just kind of like recognize that for what it is. But if people could recognize
Yeah. I
that
mean,
for what
it's
it
just
is, it wouldn't be effective anymore. But yeah,
if Ja Morant underperforms in the playoffs, the hate. Yeah, if Ja Morant underperforms in the playoffs, it's over, dude. That could be an all-time disaster narrative-wise. I don't want to say because Ja Morant's such a likable guy, he's such a good player, he's so fun to watch. So I really don't want that to happen to him. But or like LaMelo, for example, I kind of don't even. I think LaMelo might be a little underrated. That might be my hot take. I think that people is that fake Matt or real Matt that just that was really me. I think people have this idea that he's not like he has no scoring potential. People have this idea that he's sort of like that. I said this last episode, didn't I?
yeah.
Wow.
Well, you didn't say. You said some. You said that you briefly said that you think he's an underrated scorer.
He's like a lot of the narratives about LaMelo Ball are just maybe like just not true. Like he's not a good shooter, but he shoots like 37% from three on like a like 7 attempts a game, and he's one of the best from the line. And it's like I don't know if that's really true, or it's like his scoring potential is so low, but he's very close to leading the Hornets in points per game.
Yeah.
And I agree that his efficiency isn't great, but if we had any other 21-year-old, putting up 19 a game, we probably wouldn't say this.
My thing about people underrated and overrated is such a like people don't have it in their heads what underrated and overrated is. Russell Westbrook is not overrated. He's not overrated right now. No, God, no. Jesus Christ. If you say someone is overrated and the entire comment section isn't mad at you, you have missed, because that person is not overrated. If I say someone, like, who's someone I could say that's overrated right now and everyone would be mad at me? Like Jeremy Chin, like from the Panthers. Sorry, Matt, but I always thought he was a little bit overrated. If I said that, everyone would be like, "What, dude? What?" Like everyone thinks he's underrated. Like if I said Jeremy Chin was underrated, no one would be mad at me. If I say he's overrated, people would be like, "What, dude?" Trayvon Diggs, on the other hand, if I say he's overrated, my entire comment section would agree with me. Like, "Oh, you're damn right, he is overrated." But like if everyone agrees, then he's not overrated. Like if people aren't getting mad at you for my overrated takes or even underrated, if I said Russell Westbrook was underrated, everyone will be mad at me. So he's probably close. I mean, I don't think that he's good. So I don't think that he's the underrated or overrated, but he's probably closer to underrated than overrated, just because
that's why Julius Randle is not overrated. Yeah, 100%. Julius Randle, do people like he was all NBA last year, and people are like, yeah, this isn't going to last, and they were right. They were right. Nobody. He's never been overrated. Because people, it depends. I guess it depends on the context you're talking about. Like if you said that he wasn't a top 10 player and shouldn't have been second team All NBA, okay, maybe in that sense. But in the sense of like what NBA Twitter thinks, no, he's not overrated.
Or like the general consensus.
Yeah, the general
consensus. Like, yeah, no, there's a bunch of players. If everyone thinks they suck, they are not overrated. If you would call someone overrated and everyone would be like, "Yep, you have missed." Like, and it's they are then properly rated.
It's even so dependent. Like Russell Westbrook has spent his entire career either being really overrated or really underrated for the most part. Mm-hmm. And like there's some guys where it's just how they get amplified maybe more than they should, not based on just how like good they are. Like Tyler Hero, for example. Tyler Hero is either probably going to be for the rest of his career super underrated or super overrated. Mm-hmm. Just because he gets a lot of hype and people now the narrative at first started that he was like, when the Heat wouldn't trade James Harden for him thing dropped, he was doomed. That crushed him. And then he wasn't good last year.
Yeah.
And now he all of a sudden he's very good now.
Yeah, he's legit.
Amon-Ra St. Brown is overrated.
He's properly rated right now. I think everyone would say he's a good rookie. What are we showing right now? Is this these are Tyler Hero highlights showing on the B-roll. But yeah, no, he's someone why when I picked the Heat to be number 1 in the East, he was a big reason why, because I felt like he was getting a little bit underrated because everyone hated on him. And he was just, I know it was only like preseason when he was doing this, but he was making everything, right? So it's like, okay, like I think people were just kind of selling him short because it looked like at the very beginning stages of the season that he was a little bit more back on track from where he should have been his rookie year. But just no one was ready to say that because they all hated him after the James Harden news. And that's why I was really high on the Heat. And I think I was right about that. Like,
yeah. Or and the other thing about Hero is that, like, if you ever enter white boy of the month territory, that's never good. That's never a good long-term play as far as people not hating you goes.
Yeah, no.
It can only end poorly. So he was like that, plus he was on the Heat, and people are about the Heat being frauds, and he was the fraud, and they didn't trade Harden for, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Somebody said dudes think they're woke for calling Creed Humphrey
right
underrated. That's a really, really good example.
Yeah, he's a perfect example because no one has ever watched a snap of Creed Humphrey. Like, let's be real. Creed Humphrey. He's just PFF's number 1 rated center, and he's having a good season. But like when he didn't make, Jason Kelsey made first team All Pro, and people are like, should have been Creed Humphrey. It's like Jason Kelsey was like the best lineman on like the best running team. Like, he was so freaking good. Like, he had one of the best seasons of his whole career. And everyone was like, actually, bro, Creed Humphrey snubbed, bro. It's like, you have not watched one snap of Creed Humphrey in your life. Jason Kelsey more than deserved that. Like, you know who's underrated though is the guy next to him, Trey Smith, the 6th round pick. They've drafted him, and he had like some medical problem, and he was supposed to go pretty high. The Chiefs got him late, and he's just as good a rookie as Creed Humphrey is, in my opinion. So like that's a real underrated rookie on that Chiefs offensive line. But
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, that's okay.
I won't lie about knowing exactly how good every single like offensive lineman. Do you ever get asked a question and you're just like, I don't know, like rank these players? I'm like, who are the top 10 route runners in the NFL? It's like, I know some guys who I notice are good, but like as far as like ranking top 10, it gets like you have to really study each guy. There's only so much you can look at for each player.
I like this. Like, we got a question here that says rank Holiday, Garland, and LaMelo. I don't know.
I could reason.
I think it would go LaMelo, Garland,
it's
Holiday. I don't know. I don't care.
I would say that it's tough to gauge how important Holiday's perimeter defense is, and Drew Holiday has been just a hair inconsistent. I mean, I guess they all are.
Yes. 1 second. This person says Jalen Mayfield's overrated. That's a lineman for the Falcons. And I watched a game from him. It was a 2019 game, and this was the year, and he was drafted in 2020. So it wasn't the most recent season. It was the season before. Jalen Mayfield's game against Wisconsin in 2019 is the worst game from an offensive lineman prospect I think I will ever see. He was dog shit, dude. And I was like, I got to tell somebody. But it got to a point, and it was like the only game I really had on him. I had like one more the next year, and he was like, okay. So I didn't make the video because it's like, surely if I had all of his 2020 film, like he would be a lot better. Like I just didn't have enough. And then of course he's like the worst guard in football now. It's like, oh, I wish I called him out. Anyway.
Yeah. If we can talk a little bit NFL real quick.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm telling you, my new narrative for offensive tackles prospects is that the rankings of them will just be whichever ones are the best in pass protection. Dude, what are we even talking about? Like, I don't care how good they are at run blocking. Doesn't matter. Affects the game. Not at all. The best, like, there's literally, there is not a single example of a tackle being good in pass protection and flunking out of the league because they couldn't run block well enough. Am I wrong? Is that something that's ever happened?
Not that I can think of. I think of it like, all right, like Ike Ifadu, right? I'm already Ifanwu. I'm already screwing up his name. Is a very good example of this. Is someone who is just next level as a run defender, but his pass blocking, he has some issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. So I don't know. It's
like that's how you flunk out of the league.
That's how you flunk
That's
out of
how
the league.
you get it. So if there's a guy and you're like, oh my God, he's like one of the best, but he's already a pro at pass protection. Plus, he still has all the athleticism. It's just he's not quite as big as these other two guys. I'm taking the guy.
That's Charles Cross, right? Mississippi State's a Mike
Mhm.
Leach team, which means Mike Leach just passes all the time. Like this dude probably doesn't even know how to run it. Like he's a pass blocker and he's really good at it. Charles Cross from Mississippi State. Because all they ask him to do is run block. So he's probably going to be pass block. So he's probably going to be pretty raw as a run blocker. And I do think it matters, but I think run blocking is a little bit more of a mindset than like
it's like defense in the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you can kind of you gotta have the mentality for it. You gotta put in the energy to it. But there's some guys who is just like he is not quick enough to defend at the NFL level. His arms are not long enough to defend at the NFL level at the tackle position. You know, a million different things. So I'll take. I'm not saying I'm obviously doing a little bit of a bit when I say that it doesn't matter for offensive tackles. But other than going back to maybe NBA a little bit, because I think it'd be funny if you joined an NBA live and these guys were talking about offensive football tackle prospects. What were we talking about earlier before we get on that tangent? Talk about
I don't know,
Cunningham.
but I also have to leave here. It's not sort of soon.
Fair enough. What do you want to call it?
I think we can call it. Yeah, I've got to clean up a little bit. My roommate's gonna be mad at me. But yes.
Yeah. Appreciate y'all coming out to the live stream or not whatnot.
Brandon Ingram is underrated. Delayed in the comments section. Brandon Ingram is underrated. That guy rocks. I love Brandon Ingram. That's my last thing. Yeah. Oh, is it done? All right.
Oh, all right. I'll
you got it.
Yeah. Again, I appreciate y'all coming out. Well, this is gonna be a weekly thing.
Yes.
So, next week, same time, 4 Eastern, NBA live streams that maybe lead into us talking about NFL draft prospects. 4 Eastern every Wednesday.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'll see y'all.
Yep. See ya.